So, hello and welcome to the Barnsley Methodist Circuit. We're in a Holy Habits theme called Service, and we're exploring with different people across the life of the circuit how people serve through their voluntary work and through other work that they're engaged in, which may not be directly church work, but we're called into as part of our ministries. So, welcome to Mick Neal, our superintendent of the Barnsley Circuit, and also lead minister in Barnsley South Church, which is one of our churches in the Barnsley Circuit. Welcome. Do tell us, Mick, how you see yourself as offering your gift of service within the life of the community, particularly.
I think my first church role was a long time ago now, but my first church role was working in a church and community centre in Salford. And I think there I engaged with a lot of people in many different situations that were on the fringes of the church often, and took me into places that were completely outside the church. And I think that's where I gained my interest in being involved in those places and those people. It happened to be in the inner city in those days, but most of my work, ministry, and indeed where we've lived since then has been not in the inner city, but still where there's been opportunities to engage with people in those different situations. I think in terms of Barnsley, when I first came to Barnsley, I was very clear that I was coming here to be a minister within the church, that for different reasons I'd been much more community focused in the past. But I had the opportunity at the end of my first year to attend a meeting where we talked about food poverty in the town. And from that grew the vision to establish a food bank for the whole of Barnsley rather than for just any small community. And I think I was the person who didn't step back quick enough when they were looking for somebody to chair that. So that was in 2012. And we worked for a year then, a small steering group, exploring ways of establishing a food bank that could help to meet the needs of people in crisis in Barnsley. And I think my particular interest, and the reason it's important, is because that it is about people who are in crisis and trying to meet them at their point of greatest need, really. So
you're chair of Barnsley Food Bank now.
Yep.
What sort of roles does that involve then in terms of serving the needy across Barnsley?
I think it's having some sense of the oversight of the whole project. When we first started, we were fortunate enough to get some funding that enabled us to employ a worker who helped us to set it up. But we did in the early days. It was a small group, I think, of about 6 of us who met most weeks to sort out tins of food and go around and collect food and pack it ready for distribution. Since then, as the project has grown, we've been able to increase the number of staff that we've employed, and indeed the number of volunteers that we employ, or that we have working with us. And we now have 15 spokes in Barnsley where food is distributed every week. And we have some space in a warehouse that's owned by FareShare, where we can have our staff based, but where we can also receive and sort the food out. So my role really is to be the chair of the committee that oversees the whole project, to have some responsibility for the workers and the oversight and direction of the whole project.
So quite a strategic role. I guess you get involved in lots of things like human resources and finance and that kind of stuff. Okay.
And all those and things like making sure that we've just got enough food.
Yeah.
And every year we're able to have a collection at Tesco's. So we, as members of the management committee, we go and get involved in that as well. And some presentations just to raise the profile of the project. It is always difficult in projects that are in the voluntary sector to keep them at the front of people's minds, and realise the needs that is needed and the needs that we can respond to.
And clearly, I mean, at the moment, this must be a service that is being used more and more, and is more and more important. How do you continue to sort of reinvigorate people and re-energize the team?
I think that we're fortunate that we have a committed staff team, which is sort of one and two halves, I think, in terms of paid employment, and a lot of volunteers who are committed and passionate about it. And we're fortunate, I think during lockdown, we were fortunate in both receiving funding, but also in people wanting to make some sort of commitment. And we are in a place now where the demands on us is greater than it's ever been. In the last year, we gave out 3 times more than we gave out in our first year. And we're already not far off what we gave out last year in this year.
Wow.
So the demand is increasing all the time. So I think we have a very, very good person who works on our social media that keeps that up at the forefront. And the opportunity just to tell people what we're doing.
And if somebody has a passion for, supporting those in crisis, maybe has a heart for those who are poor, and has a few hours to spare, how could they be employed, as it were, in a voluntary capacity with the food bank?
Yeah, all of our spokes are they're in partnership with us. We call ourselves the Food Bank Partnership. So the spokes are in partnership with us, and they recruit volunteers to help with the distribution of food and the care of people when they visit to collect their food parcel. We also have volunteers who work at the food bank hub, collecting the food, sorting it, dating it, packing it, and making sure it's ready to go out, and drivers as well from there too. So there are plenty of opportunities, and just people who can advocate for the work that goes on, because we need to keep telling people that it's important work. I don't think we realise how many people there are who find themselves in that place of crisis, and there's a certain stigma attached to people attending a food bank, and there doesn't need to be, and it's hard to break that down. But I always say that the very first food parcel that we gave out was to a young man who was in paid employment but hit on some hard times, and he cycled from Penistone to Wombwell to collect his first food parcel. And I think that says something about how bad the need was for him. And the numbers of people that we've given parcels of food to have just increased and increased. Partly it's there so people make use of the service, but the reason they're making use of it is because they have that need. And many of us can't imagine what it would be like to open a cupboard and know that you can't feed the family, or maybe you can't feed yourself, and you don't know when you will be able to.
Yeah. So really important work, really current work, actually, sadly. Yeah. And I fear a work that will be in greater demand as the weeks and months unfold. Okay, and I know the other area of work that you're particularly involved with community-wise in terms of support is with local schools. Just tell us a little bit about
that. When in my previous places where we've lived, I've been a school governor. I was on the school PTA when the children were at school before I became a governor. And had the opportunity there to become a governor, and saw that there is a value in both supporting the school, being a critical friend to the school, but also bringing skills in that maybe the school doesn't have, or a perspective that the school doesn't have. So everywhere we've lived, I've been a school governor, and we had the opportunity when we first moved into Barnsley. Up till then, I'd been chair of governors in a number of different schools, and I had the opportunity. I was asked to consider being a governor, And I think it's an important role because it is about support. It's about support for the school. It's about support for staff, and it's about support for children, and goes on then into the support for the family in that wider community. And I think for me, that's an important part of not my role as a minister, because often I don't see it as work. It's not my job. My job, in a sense, is something different. But it's a voluntary role that I can fulfill that makes a difference in the communities where we are.
Yeah, and in the governing that you do as part of a school locally, what areas do you have? Areas that you particularly work on, or are you more generic, involved in everything?
I think I'm probably a bit involved in everything. Until very recently, I was the chair of the governors,
Right.
which is more of an overview of the whole school. But in that particular school, my then particular role had been about the staffing and the curriculum. I don't think that I have a particular knowledge of curriculum, because I think that's a specialism. But I do have experience of staffing and management of staff, particularly. And I think taking an interest in what the children are doing and what they're learning and how they're learning is important in terms of their overall development. And when I think back, I think that education needs to be about developing skills for life as much as education, as much as academic education. And I just think it's a contribution we're able to make in that respect.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Just as we sort of conclude this brief conversation, if people are not involved in volunteering or serving in terms of the community, what sort of reasons would you use to encourage people to consider that?
I think one of the biggest things is what it gives to you. That sounds I don't know what the word is, but it sounds a bit like it's about me, and I don't think it is about me or the individual. But I think that there is a lot to be gained for yourself in the opportunity to volunteer. There's a lot of benefit for your own esteem, if you need it for your esteem. But I think it is about being able to put something back into where you are, and being able to offer something of yourself back to that community, in a way that maybe you don't in your paid work, if you're fortunate enough to have paid work. But I think for me, right back from when I started, the helping to build up community has always been important. So that involvement, that seeing the community grow, seeing people grow, in the schools, seeing children grow, seeing people just in the food bank being aware, and seeing people who 1 week are turning up for a food parcel and 2 weeks later are bringing a few tins of food back and saying thank you, isn't about any benefit to me. It's about seeing that they've been able to move from that place of crisis to a place where their life has improved. And our calling, our challenge, I believe, is to make life, help people improve life if we can.
So serving can be transformative for other people.
Yes,
and actually transforming for us as well.
It can, yes, yeah.
Great, lovely. Thank you for your conversation. Thank you for what you do. I mean, we've not even touched on in terms of what you do in terms of the life of the church, but that's probably a separate conversation. But it's good to hear about your involvement in terms of service within the community, and we're grateful for all that you do. So thank you very much for chatting with me today.